Well, it looks like my watch is showing 5:31, and I think we've got everybody here.
You and I.
Hello.
And then some.
Yes. Sounds like Deanna may not be able to make it, or if she does, she may be late. So I think we can go ahead and get started. If we could go around the table and quick introductions, just in case everybody doesn't know everybody. Starting with the mayor.
Molly Costin, City of Washougal. I'm sitting in as an alternate since Alec Yost couldn't be here tonight.
Ernie Suggs. I don't think I'm an alternate.
Ray Kutch, Washougal City Council, alternate.
Nick Swinhart, Fire Department.
Don Cheney, City Council, Camas.
Greg Anderson, Camas Council.
And also here observing, although maybe out of camera range, we do have our finance directors from both cities, both city administrators, Mayor Shannon Turk from Camas, and also our labor union president, Kevin Bergstrom. Just a very short agenda that I've got in front of you tonight. The first item up on the agenda was just a status update on our ESCI master planning process that the council's approved here a few months ago. It has not started yet, but we've been doing all the background information for ESCI, so all the data sets, all the informational tables have now been put together and have been uploaded to ESCI. And Don Bivens, who is conducting he's the lead. There's many people in his group, but he's the lead on this master planning process. He anticipates being here probably right around the last week, basically it could be next week or maybe the first week of May, to start interviewing people. And as I understand it, he'll want to be visiting with pretty much all of the elected officials, I believe, and also the city administrators, the finance people, and many of the fire department administration as well.
I have more current information than you do. I think at least on May 6th, he was available all day and was going to spend the morning in Camas and the afternoon in Washougal. We have several slots filled, but we also have several council members who just are not available that morning, and Don had agreed that he will be flexible and meet with the remaining council members at their convenience, because
I think I'm down for 1 o'clock that day. I haven't heard back.
Yeah, I know Rose was scheduling some, and I talked to her yesterday. So,
Okay.
we'll have probably three council members, the mayor and myself, on the Camas side.
Thanks, Pete. That's good to know. So May 6th.
And I also just want to make sure everybody knew, because we were having some that clearly couldn't make it, that he'll meet with everybody at their convenience.
Very good. That's the update I have on that, and thanks to Pete for the rest of that. The next item on the agenda is the financial update from Kathy Huber-Nickerson, the Camas Finance Director, and we have I think everybody's got a handout that she distributed.
Good evening. So before you is our the exercise we go through is affectionately known as the True Up from 14 through 18. And 18 is what I'm going to walk through tonight, and then also I'll walk through the highlighted pieces of the 19 budget. So as you remember, the calculation begins with looking at all our expenses. So we have, and what you see before you is, if you look kind of toward the middle of the right, we have the readopted 2018 budget, the amended 2018 budget, which was amended during the year, and then the 2018 actual. So we ended the year with $9.9 million in expenses. And then we take the dedicated revenues that are kind of shared between both entities, and those we ended the year about 2.03 million. And so that left us with 7.9 million left to distribute between the two entities. And so when we run the calculation based upon the 2015 2016 indexes. If you recall, that allocation is structural AV, calls, and then population, those three. And then we allocate those expenses. So Washougal's was about 3.1 and Camus's was about almost 4.8. And then we had the settlement adjustment from the 16 year. And then we compare that with the budget. And so we had a difference of a settlement that in 2 years, Washougal will have 74,000 more to pay, and we will have 21,000 more to pay. And that was primarily due to some of the overtime costs as well as some retirements. Those two, the combination of those two, are the big bulk of what that was. In 19, you see these yellow highlighted areas, and this is where I just want to draw your attention to those areas. Under miscellaneous revenue, you'll notice it's kind of a big number there, and that's because what we did was we went ahead and put in the financing for the ambulance. And then we have the 2019 FTEs. I'm sorry, that was mine.
Still left his phone in.
Kathy left it over.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. Then we have 386,000. That's the 2019, the 4 firefighters and the 1 fire inspector. And then the allocated operating expenses of that, Camus elected to take on most of that cost. Washougal's putting in about 63,000 of that. So that's why those are highlighted. And I just want to make sure that everybody understood that we did factor those all in, and that takes us to where we are for this year's budget. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have on this. I know it's kind of a big calculation, and I think from looking at the ILA, there's things in here that we'll probably be adjusting before the 20 allocation, I would think. All right. If you think of anything, please email me or call me.
I
I'm
have a question.
available.
Are the
Sure.
city administrators and your peer finance director at peace with those numbers?
Yeah, the 19, I had a couple questions on the 18 cost.
Okay.
But I understand what you're coming from.
Where is the cost of the new turnouts, breeding apparatus? Is that not in here, or is that somewhere?
It is in here. It's in the, we do have those in the supplies and services number. So, and then so that's where those SCBAs are, and the turnouts as well for under uniforms.
And that's actually why there's such a jump in that particular supplies and services. It's kind of expensive items.
Yeah.
At least the self-contained breeding apparatus.
Good job.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Yeah, please don't hesitate to call.
Thank you, Kathy. And next up on the agenda is a discussion. We'd mentioned this at our last meeting, that at some future meetings we needed to start talking about some of the changes to the updates to the ILA, the merger ILA, that were probably needed. As you know, we're 5 years into this 10-year agreement, and just you saw that I emailed that out to you, and I started going through it myself, and I know David did and Pete did, and there's already all sorts of stuff jumping out that we can see that no longer applies, is outdated, or just needs to be updated. So I don't know, Dave or Pete, if one of you kind of want to start this discussion. I mean, I don't know that we have the intention to go through every single line item tonight of the ILA, just maybe some highlights of what we need to look at. What we
to leave at 6:30.
I'd be happy to
Could Can I interject first? And again, I want to stir the pot, but I want to preface what I'm going to stir by saying that I like this partnership on a personal level and on a public level. But I think before we engage this, we ought to find out if we're recommitting to the whole thing. You know, number one, we said we'd do that in 5 years. I think it's been about 5 years. Number two, there were some, during the issue related to paying for fire staffing, there were comments from our council. And I'm not sure we've heard back the full consensus of our council. I'm not suggesting that there is opposition. But I think, maybe not tonight, obviously, but at some given point, we should make sure that as partnerships are tenuous sometimes, I'm not suggesting this one is, but we should talk about that and make sure and I think get and vet that commitment from our peer councils. Just my 2 cents. And stirring the pot means, are we all swimming in the same direction of that stir, or are we going opposite directions? Because we're going to spend some energy and time to do this. So I think, I don't know, it's just me.
That's okay.
It occurred to me today.
I think along with that, I think as we see the future of the program, we see Camas is expanding quite a bit, where Washougal isn't expanding nearly as fast. And so, yeah, you know, this might be the preference of a good interaction in regards to what we're going to be doing in the future. I'm one of we can consolidate more things. I would consolidate them, whether it be the police department or the public works or anything to save $1 for the community and still provide services. I'm really for.
Or to do a better job, right?
Yeah, very much so. Very much so.
So please know that my question isn't in any way related or encouraging that we separate, but make sure that we're all committed to engaging in this and continuing with it. I think it just makes sense, and I don't.
Absolutely.
I
No, I think we do need to take it back to our councils. I mean, I can say personally, from my role, that I'm fully committed to continuing the partnership. I tell people when they ask, it's like, we can't go back. We can't go back. Come on.
Yeah.
So we need to find a way to make it work moving forward. But we do need to make sure our council is in agreement with my own personal opinion.
I would make a suggestion, you know, given that discussion, which is paramount before we start getting into the details, but rather than, it may be best to have Nick and Dave and I work on so many sections at each meeting, bring back a red line so you can see what our proposed changes are, and then if there's comments as well as to why a change might be made, and then it might be a more fruitful discussion. Get those to you well in advance of the meeting so you can review it, and then we can do this over a number of months of meetings so that we're, you know, just kind of doing it sizable chunks at a time.
One of the things, too, I think I would really still like to see is I'd like to see a larger involvement of community volunteer firefighters. I know that I think you were a firefighter, as I recall, volunteer for a while, weren't you? Yeah. And I remember some of the ones from Washougal that were involved in the Washougal fire, because I used to work with them in different capacities. And I know that the process of fighting fires and providing medical services has changed dramatically over 30 years. Okay. However, I still think that we need to, because we're such a small community in Washougal sense, I'd like to see that broaden and to help educate some conscientious volunteers who'd like to participate and learn a little bit about firefighting and you know, assisting us, not to the point of like if you were going to be a reserve police officer where you have to put in 20 or 30 hours a week, but to the point where they could come and once a week get trained a little bit, be shown how to do certain things, because I can turn a valve. I can go out into the street and put up a barricade with a vest on. I don't need a policeman to do that. I don't need a fireman to do that. But volunteers could do that, if there's that big of an emergency. And I'd like to really see us put some emphasis, and I know some other council members on our side would like to see some real emphasis on drawing those people back in, because we used to have a very large contingent. And but that's something for the planning stage, I think, we need to look at.
And it's not something we're going to be able to tackle tonight, but we do, as required by the ILA, we do annual recruitment of volunteers and run a volunteer academy every year. One of the biggest challenges we have is we do have a substantial number of people still interested in becoming volunteers. But we lose a lot every year, too, because we don't get the same kind of volunteers like we used to, like Rod Morris and these guys that would stay around 20, 30 years. The ones that we get now only want to stay 2 or 3 years until they can get a little experience and get a job. And the other challenge we have is a lot of times it comes down to money. Everything costs money, and especially outfitting and equipping a firefighter is very expensive. And so we will sometimes get, say, 20 or 30 applicants to be volunteer firefighters, but we only have the equipment to outfit 6 to 8 of them. Now, if we want to come up with the equipment to equip 20 of them, let's say, that's going to be tens of thousands of dollars more that the legislative bodies of these 2 cities is going to have to approve at some point to allow us to do that. So just some of the things that we'll have to keep in mind. But I think, yes, this process is a good time to talk about that more, absolutely.
What about the turnouts we're replacing? How many? Can we not use those?
We can't use them after they expire, not as unless they're just for training or something like that. But as far as actually using them for fighting fire or doing rescues, that sort of stuff, we wouldn't be able to use them. We'd have to actually buy new if it's beyond that 10-year lifespan. So there are a lot of challenges, but none of them are insurmountable. It's just figuring out what they are, figuring out if we can afford them.
Maybe offer one comment, and I appreciate your comments, Councillor. Certainly we left a couple issues sort of dangling, right? We've got a temporary solution, and it's really about the rate of growth of this program. And right now, there's a disparate rate of growth and potentially disparate ability to pay. And we may need to query our voters about what those next steps are. But where we left it was, we were good this year to help out with 2 of these FTEs, and that was a compromise that was reached that doesn't ultimately resolve the question of the staffing pressures and the program growth pressures that we probably are feeling in all of our programs, not just this one. And our community is just in a different place in terms of our ability in 2019 and potentially 2020 to sort of answer that call. But I know the council is committed to try to do that and is looking forward to the results of this master planning process, because I think the idea there was going to sort of give us a clearer roadmap and more certainty about what those needs are and when they would come in, what triggers would require more, and then we would know what to ask for in the next levy lid lift, or whether we're going to look at an RFA. So far the direction that I have is that we're all in and we're fully committed, but we're in this sort of period of time where it's difficult for us to be as responsive to program pressures than Camas is able to be responsive, and so we're kind of buying some time, and that presents a challenge for us. So I think the commitment's there, but we really need to see the results of that master planning process and then really work together to figure out, okay, so what are we talking about? How many positions? Where are they going to go? When will we need stations? How will we do that? What will that cost the respective communities to do? And then we'll have to talk about in Washougal, can we afford that, or ultimately it's our citizens, our voters. This is what it's going to take to continue to execute this important partnership, and you know, I don't know that we're going to have an answer to those questions by the end of this year in time for a 2020 budget. I think we're going to probably be looking to placehold that in some way into 2020 so that, just because of the timing of our lid lift. But, you know, we may present it with a whole new, you know, prospect in terms of how we do this partnership. We may be mutually looking at a whole different way to provide the service in the
That's what I
community
was
with an
thinking,
RFA.
with respect to what you're saying, and I appreciate that, and it kind of links to what Ernie was saying. One of the things we didn't do, we anticipated it, but we never got to trying to reconcile how we do these changes, whether it's added staff or a particular location, whatever. You know, we're growing north and it's going to expand, and how will that impact? I mean, to some extent, it'll be impactful to the formula,
Right.
but there's still a lot of capital costs and equipment costs. You know, you're adding how many homes? 280 or something like that up on.
Yeah, over several years, and there'll be more.
And maybe more.
Yeah,
So
there will be more.
I think maybe there are two questions. One, are we committed to going ahead and working hard to sustain this partnership? But then there may be a second level of saying, where are we now after we've tried to work out some of these complex dynamics and have a second commitment before we sign, and it may be a stage thing or something.
Yeah.
But I think first blush is to get both sides to say, yeah, let's go ahead, let's do this, let's invest the energy and the time and the money, if it takes money to do that, you know, with Don Bivens' work.
And
The outcomes of that are going to be relevant to
Yeah.
what this interlocal looks like.
and I think that the findings of ESCI and Don Bivens' efforts to create this master plan are critical to what Councilman Cheney is talking about. Is that we're not going to know the answers that you're looking for, at least most of them, until Don Bivens gets done with his study. I think that's going to tell us a lot.
And it'll determine whether there's comfort and ability
Right.
Right.
to do this, and how might we do it. But he's kind of wondering, I'm guessing, what it looks like so that he can do what he's going to do. So it's really dynamic.
Yeah.
Well, we're not going to go off in a separate direction because we have an agreement in place that we
Right.
need to build on. And that's the point. The agreement's not static. It's got to be built on. And, you know, we're committed to the agreement, and as you are. So we need to find a way to build on it. And I know Pete and David are working their butts off trying to make sure that it works for each community, and that's what it's going to take. So I wouldn't worry about the agreement going away, but we just need to make it work for now and how it's going to work in the next couple of years.
And it may be a two-stage thing, because there are things in the ILA that we're either not doing or we're no longer doing. Some of them we never did. So at a minimum, you know, I think it's a bigger discussion if there's major changes, but there's just cleanup that needs to take place that we need to do so that we're not in violation.
Yeah. You know, and we have, our council is meeting for its annual planning session Friday, May 10th and Saturday, May 11th. And it's not a huge portion of the agenda, but there is a portion of the agenda to talk about public safety issues. We're going to get an update from the police chief and talk about this a little bit. And maybe, you know, in light of the councilor's question, that would be an opportunity for our council to sort of reaffirm the broad level commitment that would be important to you know, keep confidence here at this table as we move into those next steps. And we could
We
just
don't have a big
double
master
check.
plan that we're going to go to and get rid of the ILA. That's not the plan. So
Nor do we, but I just thought we went through the turmoil, and I'm not saying this in any critical sense, I'm just commenting that it cost us all to think about this partnership and reflect, and you know, there were comments by some of our council members, and I don't think they were intended to be mean-spirited or critical. It was just questioning whether we should do this. So let's all go back. I'm proposing and reaffirm in a broad context.
yeah, I agree.
And when we have that planning session, you know, you guys could kind of carry that conversation back to the rest
Once
of the
again,
group.
like Molly, I'm not committing because that's my personal view. But, you know, we have to take it to the council. So
And then I think the other thing that we need to bring back, which is all related to this, is that last month we had the presentation about the RFA and the finance. We had several members that were not present, but they were able to view a recording of it. And then it was an awful lot of information and kind of overwhelming. And we didn't have time, or people just weren't ready to really have a good discussion about that topic, and we need to do that.
And I think that's going to be related to Don Bivens.
It's all interwoven.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can make it great if we
Is
just
there
we're
anything that
careful with what we're doing. I think.
You know, we took quite some time. We took 2 years, I think, and a half. Baby steps into the partnership trial. And then there were some things we were doing before that. We did an RFA, whatever the body is that you have to put together.
Planning committee.
The planning committee, which is statutorily required. We did that first, and then we decided to try an interlocal approach. Then we did a trial consolidation. Then we added some things into that, and then we did the full board one. And so here at the halfway review, it feels like that sort of careful attention is probably appropriate and warranted as well. I know that for some of our counselors, there was quite a bit of interest in what Paul presented and the dynamics of an RFA. And like everyone, I'm sure, there's questions and concerns about it. But I think that'd be a good, healthy conversation, because I think there's some interest.
Do you anticipate, I mean, in light of what Pete said, I think it makes great sense to have that dialogue if there's a reaffirmation, and I suspect there will be, but maybe that would be a secondary discussion to find out at least the sense of our peers. Does that make sense?
Before the next meeting of this group,
yeah.
just check in with the respective councils on just the notion of an RFA or something like that. Yeah, we could do that even at the planning session, just at a very, very high level.
Right.
That's a good idea. Has the Camas Council had much conversation about that since that presentation?
I think you framed it pretty well, didn't you, Greg? That some of us do and some of us don't. And I think it's important to hear from, honestly, I think it's important to hear from the union. I really do. Maybe not right at this moment, Kevin, but it's relevant.
Yeah,
it's
for
relevant.
sure. Mm-hmm. Kevin's always told me that he wasn't sure about an RFA.
15 years of looking at it.
Well, I mean, if we get all enthused about it and think it's a great idea, and the union says, wait a minute.
Yeah.
The RFA is a complex animal
Yeah.
that has a lot of substance to it that is different than the way we're currently organized. And in some ways, it's less flexible because you've got to do a lot of the work on the front side and read the tea leaves in the future when you're setting up the planning committee, because that's what gets the running rules are pre-election. It's hard to see some of these things. Just like we're encountering 5 years into this thing, we thought we had a pretty good ILA, but yet we knew it's going to need to change. Changing an RFA is harder.
I think also the dynamics of what's going to happen January 1st and November is here. We can have 9 different council people sitting here. We have 4 running, and you have, what, 5 running? So, that's going to be a
Good point.
big impact on what we do. But if we can lock something in, great.
It makes you, as you guys are, everybody's talking and mentioning this, it makes you wonder how much energy and specificity we invest into modifying the interlocal. I know it's important to do that, but it's going to take some time. And if it looks like the momentum is going to the RFA, it's all for naught, or it's somewhat moot, because that's an independent organization that does.
Right. It would be terminating the ILA.
I don't know what that means. It occurs to me that.
Yeah.
But that's a 2-year effort.
I agree. There's still some work that we need to get. But if we knew at least that there was some interest strong enough to invest, maybe we don't put quite as much energy into specificity, just those problematic things.
Right. Try to be efficient with our time. I remember.
Rather than just digging in first, I started.
Yeah. I remember late last year and early this year, just in conversations with the Washougal Council about my goals that they were setting for me and priorities. This particular important partnership was right at the very top, that for both myself and for the council just is one of the highest priorities for us, because it's a critical area of service that we provide. It's an important and positive partnership. So that tells me, short of this reaffirmation that we can do, that there's a pretty strong commitment, because they made it, one of the highest priorities for me to work on. In fact, several of the highest priority items kind of feel regional almost in their aspect. Is just kind of how we do things. But I'm looking forward to, trying to figure it out, because there is a little bit of ambiguity. We need to do something, and we're just not quite at exactly the same spot yet. And, we owe it to each other to figure that out as soon as we can, but do it well.
So what do we want to do as far as that item on the agenda? Do we want to talk anything about specific sections that we want to look at, or are we just going to table that particular topic right now, or until we can talk to our councils? Or
Well, the time frame for Don Bivens' master plan,
about 4 to 5 months.
4 to 5 months.
So July-ish, August?
If he's starting the 1st of May, let's say, 4 to 5 months after that.
Okay. So this data collection isn't part of that time
Right.
frame. Okay.
Right.
It starts with the interviews. Okay. Wow. August, September.
Over.
Yeah, we're into budgeting already. Before that. I mean, if it's appropriate, there's some very high-level, general topic areas of the interlocal I think that are easy to talk about, but I don't know if it's fruitful. I'm prepared to just go over them, but not in any substantive way. But there's language in the ILA that talks about these things will happen by this date in 2014. They happened, or they didn't happen, and
It may be good then, based on kind of all the ambiguity and so many moving parts at the same time, is that maybe we just bring back at the next meeting those housekeeping items that, regardless of what we do, we really need to clean those up so that we're compliant.
Exactly. You have to clean those up because that's an existing agreement that we have. We've got nothing else. So we got to make that clean before we try to go on to something different.
And then we can possibly come back to it after the master plan's completed and we've kind of made some, made some of those real high-level decisions.
I wouldn't be surprised if that's one of the conclusions of the master plan. Clean up the ILA. That's going to be
We'll get ahead of it.
yeah. I'm not a mind reader, but I would suspect that would be it.
We can work on that before the next meeting to see if we can bring back a marked up ILA with some proposed changes that we feel between Dave and Pete and Jennifer and Kathy. I think we can figure out the things that are critical for us to fix now.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some stuff, and there's a lot of stuff in there that's we need to change just because it's just outdated, and that's probably, although it's nice to update those things, probably not nearly as important as the stuff that we need to change this, or it's a liability sort of thing.
Yeah.
Those are probably the main ones we need to look at first.
I think we can easily do that because are we meeting every other month, or are we trying to do monthly? Or
I think we're
Every other
month.
Yeah.
plenty of time.
months.
We got plenty of time to do that then.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Famous last words, though. Huh?
Yeah, because we don't have anything else on our...
Nothing else to do. Yeah.
So while we're on that topic, what are we thinking of for the next meeting date? So that put us in June. How many Mondays do we have in June? How many weeks do we have? Let's see. Today is a Thursday.
If we could move it up in the month of June, that would be best for me, but I don't necessarily have to be there. But we leaving on a vacation on the 20th.
You can change that.
How about June 13th?
Works for me.
We put that down
I
tentative.
don't have 2 months to complete our work. A
No.
month and a half.
And yeah, I just took 2 weeks off of there.
So let's tentatively plan on June 13th, say 5:30 p.m. And then we'll start working on that. Between the, yeah,
Can you send an email to the regular members as well?
Yeah, I will.
Maybe we can get, sorry, less alternates.
Oh, well, that's fine with me.
No disrespect.
Trust me, I'd rather be home eating dinner, but.
Going to meet here, or show.
we can try to do here, or I don't know if you guys want to do a back and
Alternate.
forth sort of thing, or
Either way works for me.
Yeah, this seems to work well, like this location, so I
okay.
don't have a problem with
Anything for the good of the group? Comments, questions? We had our ECAB meeting. Is that earlier this week? I'm losing track of time.
Yes, it was.
Ray was there, which was real good, and had a chance to go over our quarterly ambulance stuff
It was on
Tuesday. And that went well. And we also have a new member from Camas on there, who is Ellen. I always forget
Burton?
Burton, Ellen Burton, which was
just look
I
back
just
there.
turn right up there. It was great to have Ellen there, and she had some great questions as well. And East County also had a new person on there, Josh Seeds, who's one of their commissioners. So it's a new group, and we haven't seen new faces there for a while. So it was great.
There was a good interchange there.
Yeah, and some great questions too. So, anything else for anybody tonight? I would say that leaves us adjourned then.
Pizza.